Starting with solving and graphing this inequality, we're going to go ahead and first try to get all the x's on the same side. So right now we've got some x's on the left and some x's on the right, so I'm going to subtract 8x from both sides. And that gives me negative 6x. I'm also going to add 7 to both sides. And now over here I have 12. Now all I did was I added and subtracted, so that's not going to do anything to my sign. However, this next step will. I'm about to divide by a negative 6. And whenever you multiply or divide by a negative, and you're dealing with inequalities, not only does it switch the sign of the thing you're dividing by, but also it flips the inequality sign. So this ends up being x is less than negative 2. And if we were to graph that result, we just want a number line with our key point being negative 2, and then we want all the numbers less than that. So there's two ways you can write it. You can write it with an open circle in less than that, like that, because that's the direction of less than, the left, or you can sometimes see it with a parentheses right at the negative 2. Solve and graph this result. So first step, it's going to have to be to get rid of these parentheses by doing the distributive property. And so that's 8x plus 16 is greater than 2x plus 6. Get the x's on the same side, so I'm going to subtract 2x from both sides, and I get 6x. I'm also going to subtract the 16 from both sides, and so I'm going to get 6x is greater than negative 10. Now, at this point, I'm going to go ahead and divide by that 6 to get the x by itself, and so x, and I divide by 6 on both sides. Now, I'm not going to flip this inequality sign because in this case, I wasn't multiplying or dividing by a negative, but rather I ended up with a negative, and that's a different story altogether. So that is my solution. Now comes the point where we graph it. Now, obviously, if I could just make a point on here, I would say, well, I'm going to just make the point negative 5 over 3. But let's pretend we don't have that. Let's pretend we can go and say there's a couple different numbers we're dealing with. We're dealing with negative 1, negative 2, negative 3. And so we should recognize that negative 5 over 3 is 5/3. So that's in this range. Okay? Now, it's greater than, so rather than being that way, I'm going to put an open circle there and go this way because it says x is greater than. Graph following inequality. It's already solved for me, so I'm just going to go ahead and graph it. So I'm going to say at the number 4, I'm going to do an open circle because I don't have an equal sign, and it says greater than, so I'm going to go that way. Okay. Now, as an inequality, or in interval notation, I'm going to write 4, comma, infinity. We're going to try this inequality. This is a bit of a bigger one, but all the pieces are there. The first thing we're going to notice is we have parentheses, so we're going to get rid of the parentheses by distributing. And I'm going to clean it up on both sides by getting rid of all the parentheses by distributing. So that's going to leave me with a 9 plus 44 minus 11x is greater than or equal to negative 9x minus 99. Now, it wants us to collect all our variables, and it right in the question tells us to put them on the left side. I prefer to put them on the left side, but that means we have to. So I'm going to go ahead and add the 9x here to both sides. And that gives me negative 2x right there. I'm also going to combine these pieces right here to give me 53. So I have 53 minus 2x. And then I still have that greater than or equal to negative 99. So I have all my variables on the left. I'm going to work to get my numbers on the right. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract that 53. Subtract that 53. And now I have negative 2x is greater than or equal to negative 152. And the last thing I have to do is divide both sides by negative 2. And that's going to finish up with an x is less than or equal to positive 76. I want you to notice a couple things. One is that I had to switch that sign because I divided by a negative. Don't forget to flip that inequality. Solve and graph this result. Now this one has fractions, but don't freak out. I don't like having fractions in equations and inequalities. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of the fractions. You can do whatever you want in algebra as long as you follow the rules of doing the same thing to both sides. So I'm going to multiply both sides, the whole thing actually, by 5. Now I'm going to do that because when we multiply by a number that is the same as the denominator, it's going to cancel out that denominator. So this 5 here cancels out with that 5 there. And so instead of having a 20x, I just have 4x because I've canceled out the 5 that I was going to multiply with the 5 on the bottom. I'm going to multiply everything by 5. So don't forget to multiply everything, not just the fractions. And from here, I want to go ahead and get all the variables on the left. So I'm going to subtract x. And I get 3x minus 10 is greater than negative 40. I'm going to add 10 to both sides. And I get 3x is greater than negative 30. And then there's one last step, is I'm going to divide both sides by 3 to give me a final answer of x is greater than negative 10. I don't need to flip the sign because my answer is negative, but I didn't divide by a negative. Now, to graph the result, I'm going to go ahead and put a number line. I'm going to mark where the negative 10 is. I'm going to put an open circle, and then I'm going to shade to the right of that solution. Let's try this one. This is a compound inequality, so there's two inequalities in this problem at the same time, okay? Now, the way we do this is we're actually going to, we could split it into two separate inequalities and then put them back together if possible at the end. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to be careful here, and you could try to keep them together, but I'm going to be careful and I'm going to pull it apart, okay? Just to avoid the potential errors that can come by leaving it the way it is and trying to solve all three parts at the same time. So we've split it into two. I'm going to solve one of them at a time. So the left part, so notice that the left part, I just went ahead and took the left part of that inequality, and I'm going to solve it by getting the variable on the left. So add 7y, or 7x, add 7x. So I get 7x plus 1 is less than or equal to 4, subtract 1, 7x is less than or equal to 3. And then last thing I need to do here is I still need to divide by 7. So I'm going to get x is less than or equal to 3 divided by 7. Now that's a fraction, but the whole time I didn't have a fraction, my answer is going to be a fraction, and that's okay. Now on the flip side, if we go over here and we try to get this one, you're going to notice it's a little bit different process because we already have that part right there. Now when we divide by negative 7, we end up with x is greater than negative 2. So at this point we have these two things. We say that x is less than 3/7, less than or equal to, and it's greater than or equal to 2. If we try to think about what that means, is that we have like this interval that works, and it says go ahead and put your answer in interval notation. So your final answer for this one, we're going to write interval notation. We start from the left to the lower number, so we start at negative 2 and we go to 3/7. We decide which ones we're going to use parentheses for and which ones we're going to use square bracket based on whether it has the line underneath. And that ends up being our final answer. If you have any questions, put them in the comments. Let me know.